Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rutch.
And I'm Spoon Phillips.
And this episode's brought to you by our Patreon family. Join our growing community for early access to every episode, exclusive video versions of the podcast, behind-the-scenes footage, full-length product demos, and more. We appreciate you. Spoon, what's going on today?
Well, our listeners won't actually know this when we do the show, but it's Halloween, so I'm looking forward to the candy and the kids.
So when you say our listeners won't know, does that mean I don't have to edit this in 2 hours and put it up on YouTube tonight?
Hopefully not. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I hope you're doing well. I'm looking forward to today's show.
I'm doing very well, and I was going to ask you what today's show is going to sound like, but I'm almost tempted to promise it's going to sound better than ever because we have a professional sound engineer on the program, and for once, it's not me.
Ooh,
would you like me to bring on our special guest right now?
Yes, please. Let's hear it.
The world is ready. Please welcome our pal, Bob Wargo of Pulse Production Group. What's up, Bob?
Hey, guys. How you doing today?
He's in the building!
Nice little edit.
Bob, it's so good to see you again. I want to give our listeners a tiny bit of history. Bob and I go way back. I want to say I was probably 10. I don't know how old you were. I think we're probably the same age, or you might be a few years behind me, but maybe we should say that. Are you behind me in age?
I'm 1 year behind you, and we were in our single digits when we first started hanging out.
Really?
Yep. Here's a way to test it out. One of my first memories of us hanging, which was a moment that really actually changed my life to this day, and there's some good stories behind it, is in the summertime, at this period of our childhood, we used to get together down by the Laurizios, right? Because we all rode bikes back then, and we'd put on heavy metal music and just ride around our neighborhoods on our bicycles, right? And one of the first times that I met you were the guy who brought out the little boom box and the cassette for the evening, and it was Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden, which I'm almost certain came out in 84, 83, 84.
I think that was 83, I think.
So,
wow.
So, yeah, I guess we were around 10, 11 years old, yeah.
That's a memory. Woo.
I'm partially responsible for your success. Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, you have a good bit to do with one of the stories I have for you that I especially saved just for you, which you're going to get a pretty good kick out of once you hear, because it all comes back to basically how we met and, influences in our lives. Music has been a major influence in my life as well as yours, and it's a pretty interesting point.
That's super cool. I know you and I share a lot of history, and not that we've seen each other in quite a long time, but I know way back then we all listened to very similar music. I didn't put any stock into thinking, was I the one that sort of introduced anybody to that? I feel like it just happened, but that's even cooler to hear it that way. And before we go too long, I want to introduce you to my compatriot over here, Spoon Phillips. We have a very unsimilar meeting story. It wasn't that same album. It was long after cassettes were an old thing. But Spoon, I'd like you to meet Bob. Bob meets Spoon.
Nice to see you,
buddy.
Yeah, Maury's telling me a lot about you. He had described you as Bob Wargo sound guy, and I said, "Ooh, we should copyright that because it sounds like Will Ferrell's next movie."
It'd probably be quite comical.
Could be. We can take your biography, and then they can turn it into a comedy, and we can all get rich.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Nice. Well, for all the other people, why don't we go back to the beginning? Tell us exactly how Pulse started, and for those listening who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how it started, if you don't mind.
I guess I'll go back to my childhood. Not much longer after I met you, my cousin taught me how to play drums. I started playing drums about the age of 13, and screwed around with that. all my childhood, played a couple different, goof bands, and then into my 20s, early 20s, continued played in a couple cover bands in PA, nothing crazy. Um, then I got introduced into being a lighting guy by a fellow musician from the area by the name of Chris Morrison. He introduced me to actually the owner of the company was John Magoo. He grew up in New Columbus with us. He was Jimmy's older brother. He used to do lights for Fallacy back when they were really big up at Flagstaff and stuff. Um, anyway, got introduced to the production side. Fast forward a little bit. The band stuff kind of wore out on me because it's like being married to 3 or 4 different people, and it's too much. But anyway, got into the production side and became a lighting guy at first. And then after a couple years of doing that, I found out, holy crap, man, if I'm a sound guy, I don't have to load in as early. I don't have to be the last guy out, and sound guys make more money than lighting guys. So I was all about it. And went over to the audio side and ended up mixing a lot of the big cover bands out of Philly, and that pretty much gave me a good foundation with what my future brought on to me. After doing that, probably around my 30-year-old mark, one of my buddies who played the cover band got picked up by an original band and they got signed. And long story short, he goes, "Hey man, you want to tour?" And I'm like, "Yep." And next thing I know, it was me and 4 of the band guys, band called 8 Days Gone. We are in a little mini RV, and that started my touring career, where I ended up meeting a lot of people that I'm still friends with today, which is really, really one of the coolest things that I find about it. But I toured for 20 years, and I started off with
Wow.
baby bands, and I was lucky enough through my history to work for artists like Guns N' Roses, Tim McGraw, Faith Hill, Sheryl Crow, Chevelle,
Huh.
Sevendust, Papa Roach, Rob Thomas, and I finally the last person I worked with before I retired was this chick that you may have heard of. She sold a couple albums here or there. Her name's Lady Gaga.
Never heard of her.
I was not doing audio for her. I was just a set carpenter that I ended up moving over to production for a really, really brief minute. And then I just retired. And that's when
Wow.
COVID came in, when every one of us who had any type of career with entertainment were like, holy crap, what are we going to do now? Talk about
Right.
scramble. So that period, I think we were going to start my Dallas office right around April of 2020. And the whole shutdown happened, I want to say probably around the end of February. And by the time the shutdown came around, we're just going to postpone opening the office because there's nothing you could really do. So anyway, fast forward 2021 came around, everything started reopening, and my buddy Scott DeVillers, who owns Pulse Stage Lighting in New Jersey, had reached out to me back in probably 2018, 2019, and had talked about opening up a second office out in Vegas. And I was like, joking around. I'm like, hey, why don't we open one in Dallas? And joke's on me. 2 years later, we did.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, we opened April 15th of 2021 and moved into our little warehouse. And he sent down probably about 1.5 semi trucks full of gear for me. And we just started creating our little niche down here.
Wow.
So, what are your clients like now in Texas?
Right now, we are doing we can do anything from a mom and pop pub to an arena show. I'm actually proud to say I'm one of probably about only 9 or 10 companies in North America that owns this robotic box called the Trinity box from an audio company called PK Sound. So it's a line array box, which if you don't know, you could probably check it out on Google real quick on the Google machine, and it'll show you what a line array is. But this box that we own is completely robotic. So generally, when you fly a line array, there's like a spine that goes up the back of it, and as you put up every 4 boxes, you pin the degree that you want the display to happen at the front of the box, and it tells the box where it's going to shoot audio. So with my boxes go hanging straight up and down, and once they're up in the air, I get on my computer program and tell it what to do, and all of a sudden you hear like a backup horn going beep, 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 like on a forklift, and the boxes start forming their array.
Wow.
So, yeah, and on top of it, the cool part with aiming audio, so the manifold in the front of the box, it's 120 degree display on the box, but it's asymmetrically, you can do 60 degrees at each side of the manifold. And there's a whole lot of other completely scientific stuff in the box that if you go to pksound.org or .net, pksound.net, you could do all the research, and it tells you all the other scientific stuff that I'm not that smart to really get into. But it's a really cool box, and it sounds absolutely phenomenal.
So, Bob, when it comes to doing a show, let's say in Dallas or a medium-sized club that has touring acts coming in, and that serves food and has a bar and all that stuff. Typically, when a band comes in, a multi-combo rock band, let's say, how many lines are you typically having to deal with?
Well, if they're a touring band, 90% of the touring artists are coming in with their own engineer. But generally, the mid-sized bands right now, well, it's kind of changed just in the past 2 or 3 years. Like a large format console used to be 48 channels, which was kind of like, the standard for large format consoles for touring. Now, with all the changes in consoles and changes in the stage racks, which is where you put your inputs for the digital desks, they've gone to 32 channel bays. So now the large format console that is like minimal is now 64. So with that, when there's open channels, you get guys double miking or running tracks or doing whatever they can to fill their workspace and make it more fun for them.
Give us an example. If you're going to do sound in a place like that for a band that's got 2 guitarists, bass player, keyboards, drums, percussion, and backup singers.
And acoustic guitar.
What does that require?
So let's say like a variety band, right? Like a variety cover band, let's like doing weddings. We'll call it like that. So you got kick, in and out, snare, top, bottom, hi-hat. Usually have rack, 2 floors or 2 racks and a floor. So 3 toms. Ride, overheads. Sometimes you'll have a stereo drum machine for like sequences and stuff like that. Then you got bass. The standard with bass used to be a DI and a microphone. I don't like the open microphones where I don't need them. I'd rather take 2 direct inputs from the bass, one coming out of the back of the head, and then another one coming through like a high-end DI, like a Rupert Neve or something along that line, to get 2 really distinct sounds and kind of blend them together for the bass. Guitars, it all depends on how crazy your guitar player is, but for like a standard guy that would come out like half-stack Marshall, he's getting a dynamic mic and a condenser mic. 2 different sounds, blend them together. do a little bit of separation to kind of help
Hmm.
with your stereo partitioning. Acoustic, depending on how loud the band is, obviously a DI, but I'll go back to another one of my little secrets when we get further on with some Sevendust stuff that I'll share with you. Then for hand drums and stuff, depending on what they're playing, whether with hands or sticks, different types of mini condensers for that, some overheads. And one of the cool things that I got turned on to lately, a young friend of mine, actually two friends of mine. The first one, Kyle Gerhardt, younger kid, really, really good engineer. He's out mixing Creed right now. And another really good buddy of mine, Andy Meyer, who is now mixing Shinedown. I met Andy when he and I were doing Guns N' Roses together, but both of them turned me on to this new microphone manufacturer that is, their name is SE Microphones. They're made over in Germany, and, you know, pretty much forever, it's always been, the staple microphone's been SM57, SM58. I'll tell you what, man, of all my choices of microphones that I've had through my history, I would take these SE vocal mics any day of the week.
Wow.
They sound unbelievable. And the crazy part is, if you look at their polar pattern online, like you could go online and you could see like what frequencies they're boosting and stuff like that. They're keeping it flat, which is great. You turn on your
Hmm.
monitor and what you put in, you're getting out, which makes it pretty nice. You're not having to do a whole lot of EQing. You're still using live mixes.
Now, when you say that, do you
So,
mean to say that like the 57s, 58s have more of a boost or a hump somewhere that you don't like, wouldn't call flat?
yep, yep, yeah. If you look at their polar pattern, once they get up to around 2K, I think,
Hmm.
they're going anywhere from a 2 to a 3.5 boost, from 2 to like
Oh.
8K. Which gives it more presence for, people speaking, but they're also your most problematic frequencies
Hmm.
when it comes to monitors.
So it sounds like when you talked about all of the miking of the drums, which is a lot more miking than I think a lot of people realize, and percussion, a bass player, a guitarist. Let's add another guitarist on there. So there's two guitars, and then we haven't even talked about how you amplify the keyboard. We really are just now getting the vocals. So it sounds like you're looking at 20 to 25 lines of just microphones. Does that sound accurate?
Yep, yep. And, probably after you find a couple extra things to keep your mind going and figure out how you're going to fit that into your mix, you'll probably add
Hmm.
about 6 or 7 more. It's like a girl with shoes, man. You can never have enough.
Now you mentioned trying to mic an acoustic guitar, and this show, of course, often being Martin's and more often talks about acoustic guitars. When you're dealing with we'll start with the bigger venues. When you're dealing with the bigger venues, everybody knows there's lots of problems trying to get an acoustic guitar out into a large room without making it just sound like a tin can and without it feedback, having all kinds of feedback problems. Um, you know, I'll just throw that out there. What is that? Where a lot of people don't know this. We're actually taping this on Halloween, and we know how haunting an experience it can be trying to get an acoustic guitar to sound good, and even
Man,
real class venues, Radio City or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do
yeah.
you tackle that?
Well, number one, I've been lucky enough to mix a lot of guys that come in where it's either solo or duos, right? And they come in with their, $8,000 Martin guitar or Takamine or whatever high-end guitar they have, and without any electronics in it, the thing sounds unbelievable, right?
Hmm.
And the thing that always agitates me the most is you get these guys that'll spend $8,000 on a guitar, and then whether they have the electronics put in or it's what they request to put in the acoustic, is kind of like the Walmart of level of electronics that they put in the guitar, which
Ugh.
on my end turns out to be the biggest problem. Because, they're like, listen, the acoustic sounds, this great. How come it's not coming through the speakers like that? And it's like, well, you have a $10 pickup in there. That's why. um, and then other times too, you get guys that have great sounding acoustic. They did their research and put the proper electronics in from the factory. And the second biggest issue that I have with acoustics is you get guys who generally will do their solo shows by themselves, which is great. But when it gets to where they're having an engineer or they're at a house rig or something like that, where I come in, they'll have their EQ turned and, volume and like any knob they're turning, right? Half the time, they don't even know what they're doing. They're just seeing stuff and they want to push it or pull it. So generally, whenever I have an acoustic solo guy or a duo, first thing I say, whatever you have for electronics on your guitar, put it to 0, make it flat. Let's start there. Let's start at its natural sound before you go turning stuff up, pulling it back. Not saying you can't do it for when you go back to doing your solo stuff with your little stick PA. That's great. But for now, let's start at 0. Yep. 90% of the time, they've never played their guitar at 0 or flat. And as soon as they strum it, they're like, holy crap, what'd you do? I'm like, nothing. I put the high pass to like 110 hertz, where it's not rumbling at the bottom end. They're like, wow, it sounds great. I'm like, wow. That was one of the things that I always learned, like start flat. Maury, now that you're a sound guy, how you starting your channel strips? 0.
I don't even have a choice. It's like before I load the show, before I get the call sheet and it says what the input list is, it comes 0 and flat. And that's, some of the things I'm going to ask you. I don't know if we told you, you're going to be on this program for an hour and I'm going to be on the phone with you 2 hours after this is over because I have so much to learn and I'm not bashful to ask the pros. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you. We talked about your favorite vocal mics and now these new mics are making you rethink what the Shores, used to be. Without going into too much of a gigantic rabbit hole, can you briefly tell us maybe some of your favorite times you've mixed acoustic guitars? If the pickup was the reason you liked it, what pickups you've seen that you'd give a thumbs up, or is that too broad a brush to paint with? And I ask you that because so many people we follow and that follow the same forums and the Facebook groups, there's all kinds of talk about I swear by this pickup and I use it at my bar gig with a stick PA. And some people are very quick to say, that's not going to sound the same when you play in front of a million people. We follow some of the major manufacturers, and we often wonder, we've sort of categorized it, and I don't want to speak for Spoon, but you can talk about a bar gig, and then when you see Jackson Browne playing Glastonbury, we have this whole thing, when it's through $1 million sound system with somebody who knows what they're doing, it's a totally different story. We finally have you to talk from that point of view.
The one thing... I completely understand your question, but on the level that you're at on the touring world, when you get to the point where, like you're saying with Jackson Browne and stuff like that, those guys are carrying guitar techs. And, man, well, for instance, when I worked for Rob Thomas, I started off as a stage manager and then got moved over to monitors. Rob is a big dude with doing acoustic shows, and he's been very, very successful with his solo career with Matchbox. So as far as gear goes, if he's not endorsed by the company, he doesn't really have a hurdle to go through with any financial stipulations on how much it costs or whatever. He's one of those guys like, hey man, if this is going to help, we just buy it. So the point I'm getting to is, for instance, I'm sure when Martin puts out their, Model X, the standard pickup is, made by so-and-so. It's just the way it's stamped going through the line. You know what I mean? It's just the way it's mass manufactured. Now, once the artist gets it, they may think that they have that same stamp model that is going through the assembly line, but their guitar tech, who these guys are amazing. The things that they do to guitars are unbelievable. You know, they could change some of the guts, they could change the pickups, they could sometimes even just changing connectors. Like you wouldn't
Oh,
believe the difference between a 90-cent connector and a $5 connector.
huh.
You know, and it's sometimes it's that minimal. You know, same thing with cable. As you'll see as a sound guy, Maury, you'll get some guitar players in there that go to the Guitar Center and they buy the $6 cable, and next thing you know, they're picking up all this weird from the shitty cable, or pickup or whatever. But I never dug too deep into the setup of the guitars. My job was to whatever I was handed, I had to make sound good. So with that, for instance, one of the best tours I ever had the privilege of mixing was when Sevendust did their acoustic tour. They put an album out behind it, and anybody who knows that band knows they're, first of all great musicians, like top shelf. They're the band that the musicians watch at festivals. That type
Huh.
of musicianship. And when they did the acoustic thing, everybody's like, "Oh, cool! They're gonna like bring it down and go from like smashing to like bring it down to acoustic stuff."
Hmm.
No, bro. It was Morgan still slamming drums, you know, and they had a keyboard player that they brought out for it. Vinny, the bass player, still played an electric bass because acoustic basses are really, really difficult to get across at that volume. So now I'm left with two acoustics with John and Clint. John had an ESP and Clint had a PRS. That's who they're endorsed by. And John's ESP sounded awesome. Through the pickups, uh, we were having trouble getting it on top of the mix. Clint's guitar sounded great out of the box. Pickups were pretty decent. However, it still was one of those shows that even when they're slamming the acoustics, it still was a little bit of a problem to get it on top and keep it on top. Then you had certain songs where one guy's strumming the heck out of it and the other guy's finger picking,
Mm.
which, as you guys know, that's a whole different level of volume. So it just so happened one of my best friends from the Philly area, his name is Nick Massimino, who's also a guitar player, was my monitor guy on Sevendust. Nick and I went all the way back to probably the late 90s of doing cover bands.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, we're in rehearsals and we go through probably about 2 or 3 hours of the band playing, and we take our first break. I walk up to Nick and I'm like, "How's it going for you?" He's like, "Not too bad." I go, "Man," I said, "I'm really having a hard time getting these acoustics on top of stuff." Miking the guitar was definitely not an option at all.
Right?
At all. So
Is it
that
ever?
anybody who's thinking that out of the gate, swipe that right to the side. That's not happening.
Okay.
So I'm like, what else could we do? And he's like, "Well, maybe we change pickups." But nah, we don't have time for that. Like every option that we came up with wasn't time, wasn't money, wasn't an option for us. So we finished out day one. We come back, and that whole night I'm like racking my brain, like, what could we do to, increase more volume? So I come back in, I go, "Okay, can't laugh at me for this. Don't know if it's gonna work. Don't know if it's gonna, two Rams head button, whatever. But we're gonna go into one DI and then take the through out into another DI, kind of like double miking a guitar cabinet, right?" So he laughs at me. He goes, "You ever try that before?" I go, "No." He goes, "What do you think it's going to do to phase?" I'm like, "Dude, I have no idea. It could be awesome, or it could be like a complete flop. Whatever. We'll give it a shot." And sure as shit, man, it was like double the volume of the acoustics. which was like it was able
Really?
to give me a whole different way of mixing the show now, because now I can treat it like a double mic cabinet where, I'm putting the panning heavy to one side or separating it or giving it two totally different tones. Like the options were just
Oh.
becoming abnormal at this point. So
So, so what VIs were these?
I think they were just radials, like J48s. And
And kill,
If you're listening to the audio only version of this, Spoon just took a note.
I mean, I'm sure there's a whole scientific side of this, but that's
Yeah.
out of my that's out of my world of experience. You know, I'm sure you can find one of these guests that you guys have that come in and go, "Oh, well, the reason that that's happening is because the polarity is blah blah blah," and this and
Yeah.
okay, great. I don't know, man. It was just a
Interesting.
matter of me and Nick going, "All right, dude, plug it in, see what happens."
Now that's really
and
cool that you had the out of the box idea, though, that you're not just going to say, "Well, it's not pickups. There's no time. Whatever." You really looked for a solution, because that's probably what your job is all day long, is solving something.
dude, that was the one thing that I learned with touring. The old line is the show must go on, right? No matter what. It's the same thing in every section of it, from load in to load out to during the day. Like, you become a lot more patient, a lot more tolerant,
Hmm.
a lot more angry. There's different levels of everything.
Yeah.
But no matter what, I mean, there's never been a show that I can remember that I've ever been attached to where it didn't go on because of technical failure or anything like that. It's either like, there's no more power in the building because of something that happened on the God level, which you have
Sure.
no control over, or a musician, had, I don't know, stomach virus or whatever, and just couldn't sing and vomit at the same time. Like, it's just uncontrollable stuff. That's the only reason a show has never
Yeah.
gone on that I
Sure.
can recall. Other than that, you better figure it the fuck out, man.
And it's funny to piggyback off something you said earlier. I didn't want to stop you midstream, but you were talking about some of the worst guys show up with a $6 cable. I did a show a couple days ago, and I won't name names, and nobody that I work with will ever listen to this. The keyboard player is setting up, and our monitor engineer said, "Where's your 1/4-inch cables?" Oh, I don't even know. I said, "What? I don't have any." Like, I knew I wasn't going to bring them. I never thought about bringing cables, and we had to give him cables, and one of those cables failed. So on the first song, there I am running, and I told him, I was told there'd be no running, but I'm running up on stage, and I pulled it out and plugged it back in, and it was like, it worked but didn't work. Like, it worked if you held it in like a certain spot. So I coiled it up, and I put the DI on top of it, and I'm running back off stage, and I'm shouting to the bass player now, "Do you have a spare cable?" And he said, "Uh-huh." So I'm thinking, well, why aren't you giving your cable to the keyboard player without me asking you for it? And I had to give it to him. And I asked these guys after the show was over, and they said, that's not the first time a musician showed up without any cables and thought, why should I have cables? So that no cables is even worse than $6, from what I could tell
you,
already.
you know what the funniest part of that story is? For usually when it comes to like house systems, like where you're working at right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way that building usually ends up with the 1/4-inch cables is because they're intermittent or they're broken or whatever. It's like, don't throw it away. We'll fix it and we'll use it. But whether it gets fixed or
Oh,
not, who the hell knows? That used to happen to us at Crocodile Rock all the time. Be like, hey, you guys have a
really?
1/4 inch? We got about 300 of them in that milk crate back there, dude. I don't know if they work, if they don't work, but
Oh,
go start rummaging through it. And that was it. But in the same token, if you're not coming to your job being responsible with every part of the puzzle that you need, then I have no sympathy for you.
yeah, I had a cable go bad at a show in New York City, and it was like a bar with a back room, performance room. So they sent me into their back room, and there was this enormous industrial cardboard box with what was basically like a viper's nest snake pit of 100 cables, and they're like, well, fish one out and hope it works, and this was an XLR cable. But you've mentioned some things while you've been speaking that bring up some other questions that I'm curious about when it comes to mixing live sound. So a lot of people are unaware that when you're in a bigger venue, that the mix that the band hears is not the mix of the people out in the house. So unless
That
you're
is
like in the
correct.
first, 10 rows or whatever. But how different is it for you as a sound man mixing stage mix and mixing out in the cavernous house? How do you approach it, differently?
It all depends on the artist. I'll just use singers that I've worked with in the past. Some singers want to hear the whole band, low level, but they want to hear everything. Obviously, their vocal on top. Then you got other artists like Rob Thomas. When I was doing monitors for him, first of all, he wears one earbud. There's zero live mixes on the entire stage. He's the type of guy that loves hearing himself through the PA. And that's what he sings. That's where he finds his key and his note that he's singing to. He
Wow.
uses his earbuds just as reference if he can't make out because the room's boomy or whatever. Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like especially now with in-ears, everybody has their own way because now it's not like back in the 80s and 90s where there were 12 wedges on stage and everybody's just whoever could get the loudest, that was the mix that you're pretty much hearing while you're
Yeah.
playing. Now, you know, it doesn't matter whether you want to blow your ears out or just have it quiet. It's all in your head, and you can do whatever you want. You could put just your vocal, or you could put the whole band. You could. It's unbelievable what you could do.
Well, that leads me right to the other question I had is what is the, the pixie dust or black magic involved in keeping the vocals on top in loud bands with lead guitar players and keyboards and even horn sections? What's the secret to that, to getting the vocals out? Because that's a big problem, at least in New York City. The vocals are often very flattened into, and unless you know the words of the song, you can't even understand what they're saying half the time.
Hmm.
So, of all my experiences on the tuning level, there's two parts to the front of house section. You have your front of house engineer, then you have your systems engineer who's responsible for the PA. Systems guy is responsible for making the PA sound good, and he turns it over to you. Now, you as the front of house engineer should be able to listen to the PA or put on smart or whatever you do for your protocol and your little way that you start your day off. You should be able to, put in your music, listen to the PA, and go, okay, I don't have to make many changes. Now, the problem is a lot of these house systems don't have guys that really know how the hell to be a systems engineer, or they suck at it, or there's just nobody there for the position. So, as you go in as a touring guy, one of the things that I was taught early by a very good buddy of mine, I grew up with this guy in the clubs. His name is Randy Lane. He was the front of house engineer for a band you guys probably heard of, band from Pennsylvania called Fuel.
Hmm.
So after Fuel started making its footprint with their success as an original band, not a cover band, Randy started touring probably about 4 years before I did. And it just so happens the first real tour that I'm ever on, he's my lead engineer.
Huh.
And not only was he a big part of the mentor program when I was in the club world, he ended up being one of the first guys that I really looked up to on the touring level as well. And the thing that he taught me right from the start is not only do you have to be a good sound engineer at this level, you have to be a good systems guy at this level. So when you're put into the situation where you walk in and the PA is completely for lack of a better term, it's out of phase, there's drivers blown, there's everything that you can imagine is
Oh.
wrong with this. You got to be able to go in there, fix it all, number one, and get something to come out of that PA that's tangible to get through
Wow.
your show. And that word of advice from him was probably the main reason I was able to get my mixes where I needed them to be. Because anybody who knows me on the touring level knows I was not the quiet engineer. I was the dude going in there and getting every horsepower out of that motor. Every set of feet from that horse were galloping when that motor was running for me. And it didn't matter what show I was doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't go in there and just put everything on 10 and blow people's heads off. I was also a very dynamic mixer that would mix to the band, mix to the crowd. There's a lot of motivation that I had behind my mix to get me to where I was at. But one of the things I definitely was able to pride myself on was the level that I was able to mix that, where it was, it was rocking your world pretty hard, but it wasn't like, holy shit, my eyeballs are about to get blown out of my head, or my eardrums feel like razor blades. Like, that is just, it's just unacceptable to me. And it's amazing how more often you're seeing that come across the board right now with the changing of the guard from a lot of the people just stepping out of the business or retiring from the COVID thing. So I guess going back to your original question, it's not just a matter of one thing or the other. There's a whole different couple categories that I would go in to tune my PA the right way, to set it up. So once I'm able to start taking my inputs and getting my mix together, it wasn't that big of a challenge to keep my vocal on top. One of the things that a lot of guys either don't use or have problems with is using compression the right way. Like, compression is one of those things that could really, really ruin your day, or can make your day like, oh God, this is the best thing ever, But one of my little tricks that I learned doing the Sevendust acoustic thing, it actually happened on. I took a multi-band compressor where you could separate it into different bandwidths throughout, your graph. We'll just call low mids, high mids, highs. And you could change the volume of whichever section you're in, bring down the volume, or you can compress it really hard or light. And basically, that has a big part to do with setting up your PA, leveling out your different components. Well, on some PAs where the horns are ripping your face off, you're never going to be able to get to a processor. With, the house guy, he's not going to let you touch the processor and bring it down and fix it. Hey, man, it's locked up. It's just the way it is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you got to find a way around it, right? There's no showstoppers, as I said before. You got to figure it out, fix it. And that was my way of figuring it out and fixing it, using that multi-band, leveling out the PA. And because some boxes, the louder they get, the more harsh they get. JBLs were always notorious for that. That 2K range would rip your face off. Which is part of the way it was. So being able to use that compression the right way, now it doesn't matter what box you have there, what amplifiers you have there, the levels of it, you can kind of make it all level again where it's at unity. Like I said, where are your channel strips? 0. Everything starts at 0 for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and to answer that a little bit differently, Spoon, I've only been on my job for 2 weeks, but I've had a couple of engineers come in who swear by using multiband compression on the vocals. Some guys swear by using it on the main mix. One guy yesterday, I thought I was doing sound, and when my day started, I had the mixer figured out, and I had my input list, and this guy comes over, and my boss says to him, "So are you doing front of house today?" He said, "Yep." I said, "Okay, here's your board." And before I gave him what I already did, I said, "Do you want this, and this on the mix bus?" He was like, "Oh my God, no." The guy yesterday did. So I do have a lot of questions for Bob and everybody in this industry on not just tell me what's the right way to do it, but I'm fast learning that there is no, here's how you do A, B, and C, because I've already had two credible people tell me opposite ideas, and I watch them mix their show from 2 feet away, and I heard the result to be good both times. And maybe that's not a good answer at all, but I used to think that when you get good at this, there's a way to do it.
That's because any kind of technical thing like this, that's not just the question. The question always has to be followed up with why. Why would you never do that? Or why do you do that? I mean, what's your goal? How does this help you accomplish your goal? And I've run into that in other things, when it comes to this kind of, technicians, how they do things that differ from other technicians.
Think about it this way. I'm sure we've all seen a NASCAR race in our lives. You know what I mean? For a couple seconds. Every one of those teams has a crew chief, right? Your systems engineer. No different. He's the guy that's in charge of the way that motor's running. I'll guarantee you, if you go through that pits and you talk to all the top 5 crew chiefs in there, they can tell you there's 30 different ways of getting that motor to perform the way it's performing. One may start at X, one may start at Z, one may start at Y. It all comes from a different starting point to get their end result. Like Spoon said earlier, none of them are wrong, none of them are right. It's just there's different variables that everybody uses to get to their end point. And the majority of it is it's the way that you were kind of raised. Maury is a guitar player. There's 30 different ways that you can hold a pick and the type of pick you use and your picking method and all that other stuff. Nothing wrong with any of them, right?
Yeah, mine's right, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's the same thing, man. It's all the way you're taught and the way you're able to put it together and what your end result is. Some guys, no matter how they start, their end result's crap. Other guys, it's awesome. But the guys that are consistent and are the top shelf guys consistently, their methods are pretty similar one way or another, but they're never identical. There's never this is the way you do it to make the PA sound good. No, because
interesting.
It doesn't matter what the manufacturers tell you in order to set the system up the right way. Is it indoors? Is it outdoors? Is it a concrete building? Is it a steel building? Is it a glass building? Is it carpet floors, wood wall? Like, you start entering all these different variables, you're like,
wow,
holy shit, man. They all make it sound different. Same box, same music, same band. Everything's the same.
Right. Yeah.
Not the outside. So.
Yeah, because I think almost everything we hear is a reflection of something, not always a direct sound, right?
Correct.
And you already exhibited your very good memory by your childhood story of Maury bringing the cassette. But obviously, when you talked about the different floors, the different buildings, these are things that you know to expect the unexpected, but you also now have the experience to know that most of the time, metal building with carpeted floors is going to give you these kind of dynamic issues, and
correct.
And you just have to bank that knowledge.
And you also have to look like, let's say I go into an arena, right? Is it hockey season where they got the wood down on the ice? Is it basketball season where they just got the floorboards down? How many different bowls in the arena are they using? Like you go into the Spectrum. What's the one down in Philly now? The Link or whatever? I don't know.
Now.
We'll just call it the Spectrum. Spectrum had 4 bowls, right? First, second, third, fourth. You may go in through there where you're only half arena, but only using the first bowl on the floor. The other 3 bowls are covered with black drape. So every show's different one way or the next. And that's why people who start using in-ears for the first time, they're like, what the heck, man? It's supposed to be, it's supposed to sound the same all the time. No, it'll never sound identical.
Wow.
Well, you have to consider you're in a different venue every night, right?
Yeah.
Now you also have to consider, are you carrying the same microphones? Are you carrying the same console? Are you carrying the same engineer?
Well, I don't know if you're mean to, but you're really making me feel very, very fortunate that I got a job at a building and I'm not doing this in this city, that city. I'm going to work where the PA, the room, the mics are all the same and it's the band that changes. And until I talked to you today, I thought that's a little bit odd. I'd rather be with a band that's always the same and take that everywhere else. It sounds like the band being the variable might be easier than the venue, the mics, and everything else.
It all depends on what you have as your house system too, how it was set up, type of gear that's in there. You're lucky, man. You got a good console in there. I think they just put a new L Acoustics PA in there, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They have the flagship Coda.
That's a Claire Brothers PA. Yeah, I think. I'm thinking down at the event center down in Bethlehem. They just put
Hmm.
in the L Acoustic box.
You began doing cover bands, as you said. You moved into doing clubs and particular clubs, and then you moved to touring and big tours all the way up to arenas. And then you said you retired, and now you have your Pulse Systems company in Dallas when you're operating out of there. So if you're no longer touring and you're no longer running, sound for a particular club, what is it that you actually do these days?
Most of the time, I've been trying to walk away from actually doing the shows. I have a couple young guys in their mid 20s to early 30s that, man, I'll tell you what, they work hard, they get it. They have the drive, they have the motivation. Like, it reminds me of when I was a kid, and I mean, dude, when I first started mixing, I can't tell you how many times, especially back when I was in my 20s, there were so many incredible cover bands, where you'd walk up to them and go, hey, man, I know this house system. They don't really have a house engineer. I'll come out and I'll do it for free, or buy me a couple beers or, throw me $10 for gas money, whatever. Most of the time, the first year that I decided to start mixing, I was doing it, for free just to prove my worth. And anyway, getting back to your original question, for me now, I'm just pretty much more into operations. My degree from college is in technical theater. It's more the design. So I'm getting into more of that again, drawing
Hmm.
shows and sort of so forth. But I like going out there and showing these younger kids, like especially now, they're I've gotten them to become good mixers. They get it. They have their head wrapped around it, and they're really, really turning out to be incredible mixers. Now it's at the point where I'm trying to get them to understand how to be a systems engineer and everything that
Hmm.
comes along with it, and a crew chief. And that's more of the battle to get them to that level than the mixing. The mixing is not that difficult. It's the setting up the system.
You spoke of your mentors as you were coming up and as you continued to learn, and now you're in the mentor role and passing on what you've learned from your career.
Yep,
To me.
yep, yep, yep. I find it very honorable that peers like Maury, who I've known since a kid, several other guys that they question me for my opinion or my knowledge, and I find that pretty cool, man. Because anybody who knows anything about Maury or myself, we come from you know lower to middle class little coal towns in Pennsylvania, where
Yep.
blue collar life was what we lived. It's what we grew up. None of us really came from anything crazy. We had good lives. We never, we weren't starving as kids or living in cars or anything crazy like that. But, we never in a million years if you would have talked to me the day I graduated high school and asked me if I would have ever thought that I'd rap the world 50 times, traveled to 133 countries, done, God, I don't know how many shows I've done in my life, well over 10,000,
Really?
Well, dude, I mean, think
Wow.
when I was touring for probably 10 out of the 20 years that I toured, I was touring 9.5 to 10 months out of the year.
Wow.
So you're averaging 3.5 shows a week. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, it's a lot of knob turning, man.
That adds up to an awful lot of shows.
If you're not watching the YouTube version of this, Spoon's calculator said awful lot when he added
Yeah,
that plus that.
you gotta
And
flip it upside down though.
yeah, yeah.
But it's funny you say that. I back before everything was on computers like it is now, like our daily calendars and right. It's on our iPhones or iPads, whatever. Back in like the early 2000s, when I had my company up in Pennsylvania, my sound company, 2005 was the last year we ran full tilt, and from Memorial Day to Labor Day, my company did 580 shows.
My God.
But dude, that's when cover bands were going Wednesday through Sunday.
Yeah, seriously.
So think about it. So that type of schedule where you're basically off Monday and Tuesday. I had two to three house systems and 5 mobile systems at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. You want to talk about turn and burn? Dude, that gear was never in the shop. It was always working.
You basically took the idea and multiplied it, and there was never a time where that stuff wasn't on wheels somewhere. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. Well, on a PG program like this, can I ask you the obvious question? Can you give us one really good story, whether it's a horror story, funny story? If it could be an acoustic story, that's extra credit, but doesn't have to be. But somebody listening to this program that would love to know, including me, love to know what might be an interesting thing that only you know, unless we were in your in your Winnebago or whatever it would have been, or just make one up.
How about give me a minute to think about this? I have something special that I brought to the table just for you guys. So
Okay. Okay.
it's going to take a little bit of technical moving around here to make this happen, but I think we could pull it off by me sharing the screen or something like that. But I used to record my board mixes, my left rights out of my consoles from 2009 up until I ended my career, just for safety. If somebody in management's like, "Oh, I couldn't hear this or couldn't hear that," blah 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 blah. I always had that to look after. So I've been lucky to catalog a good part of my career, and being that we were talking about the acoustics and the double DI and stuff like that, I'm going to play one of my most favorite Sevendust songs from the acoustic tour that is nothing but a board mix coming out of my left right.
Awesome.
I may have made some mistakes that cost me more than my pride. Somewhere along the way, that part of me finally died. That part of me never tried. Some part of me still alive. Carrying the pain I made. Can't sleep 'cause my conscience keeps me awake. It keeps me awake. Sunset. House of Blues, man, we're here again. You guys happy to see us? Yeah, my karma's here, it seems. Always a step behind me. Yeah, how bittersweet is karma. All you've done as you want it, you know that it's coming. Don't chase for nothing, we all how bittersweet is karma. All you've done as you want it, you know that it's coming. Don't chase for nothing, we all
It's funny, I forgot which show that was from. If you heard LJ say it was from House of Blues on
Really?
Sunset Strip, we were one of the last shows in there before they tore that building down.
No
Oh.
kidding.
To make it even cooler, that was the first night I ever met Wolfie Van Halen.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Who is one of the coolest people you'll ever meet in your life?
No.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
Wow.
And God, he's a on drums and guitar. Holy,
On drums
he's
too.
so good. Well, that's his main instrument.
Wow.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
Oh. Oh, wow. Wow.
Yep.
That sounded awesome, Bob. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
That was definitely one of the coolest shows that tours, I should say, that I ever had the opportunity to mix. It was really, really phenomenal. Like, if you like, that song was great because there's a lot of finger picking. There was a lot of like strumming hard, like crescendos with it. Like everything that we talked about earlier, man, was all in that song. But if you
Wow.
notice through it, there wasn't a part in any part of that song where they weren't playing that you didn't hear those guitars. Whether they were finger
Exactly
picking,
right.
strumming, whatever, and there was separation. You could tell what everyone's doing on top of Morgan behind them smashing the hell out of the drums.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
and there was no screen in front of them either. So if people are like, "Oh, it probably had plexiglass." No, 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 no. We had
Really?
zero plexiglass. Yeah,
Wow. Wow.
yeah.
And
And
that
if you'd
bass
ever
sounded
been
like it
in,
was pretty detuned too. You know?
oh yeah,
That was
yeah.
deep.
So
Wow.
And the vocals stayed on top the entire time. So they're clear
yeah.
the entire time. Yeah.
And if you know
Wow.
anything about Sevendust, they are a band known for their harmonies. They're doing 4, sometimes 5-part harmonies
Oh,
for
wow.
real. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
No way. So I
So
know there's no fast answer to this, but is it fair to ask that they know what's going on stage enough that they're not giving you a problematic stage sound to fight against to get vocals up? They're part of your solution. Is a band that like them, if you can get their vocals above everything, get the acoustics to sound separated, does that rely partly on they've got to be a good team for you?
yeah, generally that's the one cool thing a band like those guys, especially on the acoustic tour, probably up until like the last leg of it, because I think we did it for a year, a little over a year, that whole leg. I think we did like 4 or 5 legs, 2.5, 3 months at a time. But up until the last leg, they still sound checked every day. And usually with sound check, we would find anything that was problematic with the PA, whether there was that 180 hertz rumble with the acoustics or one of the floor toms would let loose because the show was so dynamic, I couldn't really tighten up my gates that much on drums. So it had to be one of those things where if he hit the floor tom like tapping it or smashing it, it was being heard. Same thing with his kick drum. So
Wow.
musically, there were a lot of challenges with it, and that's why I think I enjoyed it so much because for the hour and 30, 40 minutes that the set went on, I'm working the whole time.
Oh,
You know, generally with a rock band, usually once you get into it, you're making a couple changes or changing your snapshots or whatever. But as far as mixing, you're not really turning too much. That show, I was turning from start to finish, which
wow.
wasn't because anything bad was going on. It's just because it needed to happen for this song or that song or, you know, whatever. So,
You're like the extra member of the band, basically.
That's one of the advantages of working with the same band. Is when you come to know the songs, you know when there's going to be guitar fills, you know when there's going to be a short
yeah,
keyboard break, and you know those sorts of things, and you know they're coming up, so you're ready for them. That's one
yeah,
advantage to work with the same band.
yeah, yeah.
That's a big advantage
Well,
of doing a
excellent.
podcast with Spoon, too, because we know when to talk over each other without even asking.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was a wonderful,
Yeah.
that's a great surprise
Yeah,
to hear that
yeah,
and hear the whole song and hear. Interesting too, but with board mixes where you don't hear the audience, only at the very end you hear them in the background, but so you're getting just the stuff that's coming through the board, which then makes it, like you said, you can hear your mix through the entire
Yep.
song. So
yeah.
super cool.
I mean, don't get me
Very
wrong, it's
cool.
not the perfect mix as far as what you're listening to. Like the vocals are a little bit heavy, there's a little bit more effects than there should be, but it's all because that's coming through a board. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wasn't like it's not like we were mixing it down after the show and making, you know, critiques on it and changing, you know, for a final product. That's like what was going out to the audience through a PA system, not through a recording deck, you know?
Being
So
filtered, yeah.
you'll find this, man. Buy yourself a little 2-channel Tascam and plug it into your B outputs of your desk, and you'll hear your mixes every night, man.
Okay.
Listen to your mixes, and you'll be able to hear the difference between what's happening in real life and what's happening on tape, right? And sometimes hearing what's going on tape, you're like, oh, if I do this, it'll coincide with this in real life, in real world time, and you're fixing problems. You know, it's
Nice.
kind of like when the NFL guys watch film after the game. You know, Monday, let's watch the film of the game and see where we. Same thing, man. You know, and
Yep.
it really helps a lot. Plus, it's just always good to have a backup. So if somebody's calling you out, you go, oh, yeah, here you go. Listen, it was there.
I like that idea. And I almost want to ask you, maybe off camera, how many times have you needed that to save you? But I'm not sure I want to know either.
I've never needed it to save my career or my job, but there's definitely been some spots with different artists where sometimes you get somebody from management who comes out or somebody from the booking agency or whoever, one of the office positions. And depending on the tour, if you're the headliner, the day goes however you want it because it's your show. But if you're one of the support bands, sometimes the only thing that you get is tapping through lines on changeover. One of the things that I don't do and that I never did was, unless I absolutely had to, it's just stupid and it's unprofessional and it's just a pain in the. When you're at a show, like usually a festival, right? Where everybody had line checks earlier in the day, and even if you didn't, you got headphones there. If you're carrying the same console that you've been for the whole tour, and you were able to go out and at least tune the PA, if your microphones are working, you should be pretty relative to where you need to be by 30 seconds into the first song. So these
Okay.
people that are checking all their inputs through the PA, you don't need to do that. Different story if you're a house guy and you're mixing the band the first time. But if you're on tour with
okay.
these guys, there's no need for that.
Interesting. I wouldn't know that if you didn't say it. Yeah.
Well, think about it. If you're in the crowd, the last thing you want to hear is kick drum for 3 minutes. Kick drum, boom, boom. And it's
Right.
on weld. You know, they have it turned up all the way. You're trying to eat your popcorn. It's like boom, boom, boom. I want to drink my White Claw and eat popcorn.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, speaking of getting a drink and getting some popcorn, I think we should wrap this up soon. But I do remember you teased you have something very special for our episode today. Could I ask you to show us what you got?
going back to the original Iron Maiden story of how we first met, my first time in Australia was with Sum 41, and we were doing this tour down there called Soundwave, which was the biggest tour in Australia for, God, over a decade, where you'd go to all 5 of the big cities.
Wow.
So you do Melbourne, Adelaide, Sydney, Perth, and one other one. I forget the other one. So anyway, we start off in Melbourne. After Melbourne, my singer gets pneumonia. He goes into the hospital. So they're like, okay, well, what the hell are we going to do with the band and the crew? In order to send us home, it was like $10,000 a flight, one way. So like, it's cheaper for us just to keep you guys there, keep you on payroll, because all the rooms had been paid for by the tour, all this shit,
Wow.
right? So this is my first time in Australia, and like, I basically have 2 weeks off. This is amazing. So I got to go to the Cherry Bar, which is a huge bar in Melbourne, which, you know, like, you walk outside, there's a big mural of AC/DC by it, like that. But anyway, this is the best part of the story. Me and my monitor guy from Sum 41 are walking down by the band shell in Australia, in Sydney, in the harbor, the big opera house, right?
Yeah.
So we're going about 2 blocks north of it, and we're walking down the sidewalk. And Iron Maiden has always been one of my most favorite bands since I was a kid, number one. And number two, I'll fight people to the death. They're the best metal band still to this day from the 80s ever.
I'll die on that hill.
They've been selling out stadiums since the early 80s. There ain't nobody else metal that's been doing that. So hands down, best band ever. So I'm walking down Sydney, and my monitor guy goes, "Hey, you know Iron Maiden, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "It's Nico." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Holy shit." I'm like, "Nico, what's up?" Give him a high five. He's like, "What's up, mate? How's it going? What y'all up to? You gonna have some like Nico from Maiden?" I'm just like never in a million years, if you asked me, when I was 10-year-old Bob riding bicycles with Maury and the Larizios and Stevie Dacey, listen to Iron Maiden, peace of mind. If I'd be in
Wow.
Sydney, Australia, in my late 30s, talking to Nico McBrain.
Wow. And you started as a drummer, and that was his first record with them, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. That album starts with him. Wow. That is
Dude.
awesome.
So
Yeah.
cool.
And you owe it all to Maury.
Honestly, the funniest part is I've never been a person to go to shows because when I was younger, I was always doing cover bands. So,
You're at the show,
you know, we're doing shows Wednesday to Sunday when we were younger. There's no time to go see shows unless you take off work. Can't afford to take off work.
No.
So anyway, even now that I don't really tour anymore, I still don't go to really see shows. And it's so funny because everybody's like, "Dude, don't you miss it?" And I'm like, I don't miss the show. I miss the loading in. I miss fixing all the problems. I miss working with some of the most incredible technicians and touring guys across the planet.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I miss. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing like, you know, coming out of the gate first song and your mix is just dead on accurate and just feeling that vibe from the crowd and the band and just being like, this is awesome. The only time ever in my career where I actually had hands that were shaking before we went on, the year after that, back in Australia with Sum 41 doing Soundwave, we're playing the Olympic Soccer Stadium in Sydney, which was open 270 degrees. Soccer stadiums are massive. They're like 3 times the size of NFL stadiums.
Really?
So with the floor open and all the seating, there had to be close to 200,000 people in the stadium. And it was funny. We get done doing our line check and stuff, and at the time I was smoking, I light a cigarette and I turn around and I'm like, there's a lot of people in here. I finish my cigarette. I put my hands on the console and my fingers are rattling, and I'm like, one of my fingers could really ruin a lot of days right now.
You have
That
the
was the only
power.
time- dude, like, just take the main bus and go. You're all having a miserable time. Oh, you're having a great time. Miserable time. Great time.
I remember that.
Like,
I'm imagining 200,000 Australians yelling out, "Thanks a lot, Bob."
but yeah, that was probably the only time ever in my
Wow.
30 plus years of being in the business that I wasn't like scared, but I was definitely like a little nerve wracked. Like,
Sure.
wow, because half the time, 2/3 of the people are behind me. I never pay attention to it. I just so
Hmm.
happen to light a cigarette and turn around. And it was like, wow.
Let that be a lesson. Don't turn around, right?
Yeah, don't turn around, Maury.
It's like, don't look down. I'm
But
afraid of heights and crowds. Yeah.
I've been very lucky with my career, and it's been great sharing some stories with somebody that I grew up with. That we kind of learned about music together.
Yeah.
You know, just riding our BMX bikes and listening to metal and rock and roll
Hmm.
and just being dumb little kids trying to stay out of
That's right.
trouble.
I was so psyched when we talked about maybe doing this that you were, amenable, and we're so proud of this podcast, and we want to get our friends on when we can. And most of the time, it's like, are you still doing that? Some guys I work with are like, yeah, we're still doing that. But for you to be energetic about it, and we finally get the opportunity to speak to somebody who has a lot to do with what we like to talk about, but at such a bigger level. And I know I'm going to have some follow-up questions, after the fact, and I hope you don't mind me staying in touch. But
Never,
feel really
never.
lucky to have caught up with you after all these years. I'm glad you and Spoon finally got to meet. And
Yeah.
before I let you go, I do want to ask you, where can our listeners find out more about you if they want to look you up?
We just took on a new partner with the company, so we're going to be changing the name of the company. That's why the
Mm,
website hasn't been made for my office. The Jersey office has the website. My
okay.
office is still kind of like, in limbo right now. But I don't know, man. I thought about writing a memoirs a couple times. I don't know if I'm going to do it yet. But are either of you guys dads?
Nope.
No,
Nope. So I'm a dad. I have a daughter. Um, One of the coolest things that I did for her was it's so hard to explain to your child why you're gone so much.
Yeah.
And it's always that like monkey on your back. No matter what you do, you never feel right. All you're
I
trying
can't
to do is
imagine.
make an earning, you know? So one of the goofiest things that I decided to do for her was every big city that I went to, all over the world, I'd send her postcards. Just write,
Aw.
hey, thinking about you, but it would all be stamped from from the city that it came from. And that little bugger, she saved them all, and she's got like,
Aw.
which is really cool.
That is
So,
awesome, man. That's
great
awesome.
story. Great story. Thank you.
Yeah. Now she has a lot of postcards from Dallas, right?
yeah. But on her behalf, her coolest thing, back when I did Trans Siberian Orchestra, every year those guys for New Year's, they bring out a guest, like massive singer. The year that I did it, was Roger Daltrey from the Who.
Oh,
So who happens to be super super awesome, not only as a singer but just as a human being. Really good dude.
nice.
And I'll have to send you a picture of my daughter's Christmas present. It's a 2007 Les Paul Standard Starburst with Roger Daltrey signature to Phoebe, your buddy Roger Daltrey.
No way.
Yep.
Wow. Good for her,
Fantastic.
Yeah.
man. She's
So
lucky.
she's got a couple cool pieces of memorabilia. That's probably like the biggest one for her.
Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, Bob. This has been so fun. If you can think of anything else you want to share with us after the fact, please don't be afraid to message me. We can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, sure. I enjoyed every minute. So,
And nothing for nothing, dude. If you guys end up getting interest in this for whatever reason, and you guys get compiled questions and stuff, we can always do a part 2.
I would love that.
excellent. Very
Or
cool.
3.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, from all of us at Martins and More and Bob Wargo, thanks for listening.
Hear you later.
Thanks, guys.